Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our continuing series of Know Your City. I cannot tell you how delighted I am to have Kelly Linehan with us this evening. She's the director of the Waltham Public Library, and it's one of my favorite places in the world. I was there earlier today, and hoping we can gain some insights on what goes on behind the desk as well as what goes on in front of it. Kelly grew up in Waltham. I forgot to ask you where you live now, but I do know that she worked in Cambridge at the Cambridge Library before she came to the Waltham Public Library after getting a degree in a master's in information and library science. I'm close enough, from Simmons. And I've lived in Waltham for about 20 years. You're the third director of the library that I've experienced. And each time there's been a change in leadership, there's been great growth at the library. So I want to welcome you.
Thank you.
I'm so delighted to have you here tonight.
I am very excited, and I'm going to try not to annoy everybody with my library excitement. I feel very fortunate to be able to talk about my favorite place. So thank you for the invite.
Yes. Before I actually turn the microphone over to you, I do want to ask the participants, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box, and I will be monitoring that as we go along, and we'll present them to Kelly so she doesn't have to worry about what you're writing. Also, we are recording the webinar, and it will be available both on YouTube and on the League of Women Voters webpage at sometime in the future. Okay, Kelly, it's all yours. Tell us about the library.
I'm very excited to tell you about the library. I feel like I don't get a lot of opportunity, maybe other than, boring my husband to rave too much about it in such an intimate environment. So I'm super excited. I love the library for a lot of reasons. I feel like, first of all, we have all these amazing resources for people for free, and you can actually sit on your couch and lie down and access most of them, which pretty much makes us just about a perfect location. I'm a very curious person, so I think without a library, I don't know how I would access all the nonsense that I'm curious about. It saves me so much money. And I feel like Waltham seems to be a community. I mean, I grew up in Waltham, but we are a community of like-minded people, a very interested community that really, really loves their library. So it feels very fortunate to be able to serve the community this way when we just feel very, very like-minded. We're a very busy library. Certainly COVID has changed things, and right now with COVID and all the safety precautions, a lot of the Minuteman libraries we have different hours due to different circumstances, but for the most part, Waltham typically ranks in the top 10 circulating Minuteman libraries, and we're actually number 7 in terms of e-material circulation, which I always think is fantastic. Waltham really loves their ebooks or any downloadable materials. They're very fluent in all those platforms, which is awesome. We love it. There's 42 libraries in Minuteman, so I think being number 7 and in the top 10 for physical materials is pretty amazing. Each employee in Waltham, we average handling about 17,500 transactions each year, which is a lot of transactions. In 2019, we were close to about 500,000 circulation transactions. Fiscal year 20, due to COVID, it was somewhere around 300,000, but still lots of material being checked out. We had in fiscal year 20, which involved, fiscal year 20 ended in July, right? So it's got part of the lockdown in there. We held almost 23,000 programs for the community. I'm sorry, 874 programs, and we had about 23,000 people show up, which was very, very impressive considering we were all under lockdown for 3 months. So it's a really busy, vibrant spot. And I thought maybe I would delve in a little bit about, people always sort of, I think there's a little bit of a mystery. Maybe that's my ego talking about what librarians actually do all day. So I thought maybe I'd dive into a little bit about that. I think in I guess maybe oversimplified terms, we're responsible for the educational and informational and recreational resources in the city. But for me, it really goes beyond, it's not just buying materials or picking out databases. It's a lot of research into what Waltham, what are the best materials and the best resources for this specific community, this very diverse and vibrant community, and finding materials that people, that match the community, that match their wants and needs, and that really resonate, that people are going to be interested in. It's very data driven. We use a lot of data that we accumulate here, specifically at the library, but we're also constantly talking to the public, all the schools, and other community organizations and community partners to get some information on what people are interested in. We spend a lot of time looking at what Waltham doesn't want to check out, what they're not interested in, and we try to figure out if there's a disconnect, if it's something on our end where we're not promoting it maybe enough or giving people enough ease of accessibility to it, or whatever the reasons are, just to build a more vibrant collection, a more vibrant community. And we're also trying to anticipate needs. And as a public library, we take really seriously our commitment to facts, I guess, particularly in terms of cultural and civic engagement. We're really committed to the idea of being this trustworthy resource for people, and a resource for whether you want to just have a debate about local politics or you want to have this bigger global discussion. I feel like particularly in 2021, citing a Facebook meme, as funny and amazing as they all are, is not really, not really what we want to see happen. So we take that role of trying to provide those resources pretty seriously. And we're also constantly thinking about how people access that material. So how people are accessing the library and how easy our resources and materials are for people. We take a lot of time to look at what the barriers are in the community, whether that's something like a language barrier, whether it be homelessness, general accessibility. Could even be something as age, how toddlers need to access something, or early literacy students need to access something, are certainly different than some of our, maybe an adult patron, your average adult patron. So we're constantly looking at those barriers. I was thinking earlier about our laptops. I feel like they're a really simplified example of that work. We have laptops and people can check them out, and that's awesome. But to really, I think for some people, you're really going to need to have internet to take advantage of a lot of the things that you want to do on the laptop. So the library should also be providing hotspots, internet access, which we do. And then added on to that would be access to the training to know how to use the laptop and connect it to a hotspot. And we're offering those computer classes, and we're offering individual one-on-one tech appointments. So it's sort of a full picture service about how, we're looking at the whole picture in terms of the service. Another very simplified example is our children's room has take and make craft bags, some science bags and some art bags. And the idea is that you can log online and see what the librarians are doing and do it from home, but we're providing you with the bag and the instructions and all the materials you would need to do this craft or science experiment at your house, which is, again, sort of leveling the playing field and making sure that everybody can access our resources. And something we've talked about this year in particular is that we're constantly trying to think about meeting people where they are and not coming to any service transaction with any expectations in our own mind. And I feel like with COVID and lockdown, it's more important than ever. I think that 2020 has turned a broad spotlight on some of the inequalities in our community. And we've really been thinking about how that's reflected in how we serve the community. So we've been trying to use this past year as an opportunity to rectify some of that. And certainly in Waltham, we are very fortunate to be so well supported by the community, both fiscally and with just their patronage. Certainly the city-specific, Mayor McCarthy and the city-specific support, our wonderful trustees, the patrons, the friends of the library. And it's so wonderful because it allows us to do this type of reflective work. And I feel like while nobody was prepared for a pandemic, and I I can't tell you how many times I have thought to myself that at Simmons, they never once covered any type of pandemic prep whatsoever. And they made me take cataloging, which is like the least useful class that I have ever taken, with all due respect to the catalogs out there, of whom we certainly need. I think that while we were not maybe, I wouldn't say prepared, I feel like the library team was really able to rise to the occasion and pivot pretty quickly. And then go ahead.
I have a question here.
Yes,
Since you
sure.
became director, there have been numerous advancements regarding our library and libraries in general. From the time you started in Waltham, what would you say was your greatest challenge in adapting library functions to patron and community needs? That's a big question.
That's a big question. What an interesting question. I think very fortunately, I mean when I say that, I think Waltham loves their library so much. And sometimes that love is shown by maybe questioning changes or decisions made. But I think that's actually great feedback. That actually shows an interest in your community, and it's super valuable. I think overall, people were pretty open to the changes we implemented. And people who maybe were uncomfortable with it were willing to reach out to me directly so that I could speak to them about my vision and what we were hoping to do. And we're pretty open-minded with it. I think one thing that's interesting about Waltham, and I can say this about Waltham because I am from there and my parents still live there, is that we are a very interesting city. There's a large, a very varied, I always want to use the word patrons because we use it so frequently at the library, but the citizens of Waltham, we really are, there's a variety of socioeconomic backgrounds and cultural backgrounds and languages spoken. And I think balancing people's understanding of that, or not balancing, but making sure that everybody is aware of what the community of Waltham really is. It's a different community than it was 50 years ago. That's just the fact of the matter. It's, you know, for me personally, I look at Waltham has one of the highest levels of food insecurity in children in the state of Massachusetts. And although I would need to double check that source. I hate to cite a source. I hate to cite a fact without giving a source for that. But this is the same community that I grew up in and didn't lock our front door. So it's hard to rationalize these two ideas in my head. Like, how did I have this childhood when there are children who are struggling with food insecurity? That's an interesting mix in a city. And I feel like making sure that people realized that it's my job to serve that entire community as a whole was something that I struggled with a little bit. I'm not sure if that answered that question actually, but.
I'm sure it will build on this.
Yes.
I have a question for you. It's not from the audience, it's from your moderator. The pandemic came, they closed the library. You told me that you were fortunate enough to keep everybody employed. Can you tell us the process you went through when you had to close the doors to physically having people come into the building and the work that you've done since then?
Yes, so we pivoted pretty quickly. The decision to close, to go under lockdown, that was really a citywide decision, certainly made in conjunction right with the city and the Board of Health. I felt, there were so many unknowns, particularly last March. I think, we all started out thinking, but it's just the flu, it's just the flu. And then as we learned more and more, it felt like the right reaction to keep everybody safe. I think the tricky thing with COVID is there are so many unknowns, and if we're able to keep people at home and safe and employed, that's amazing. The library shifted to primarily a work from home model. We immediately shifted our materials budget is a good example of this. We stopped buying, we didn't stop ordering and selecting print materials, but we didn't actually, we didn't have them shipped to the library. We took those funds and shifted them over to e-content. We actually ordered 2 more databases for people to access while they were at home. And we tried to really transition our services to be as digital as possible. We had been working, we released a new website just this fall, so we were really trying to speed up that process while we were closed to get as much done behind the scenes as possible. We started collecting, our archivist started collecting stories from people during lockdown for an archive of these COVID stories. We collected artwork so that we would have a community record. We sort of joked around that it's probably going to be a couple of years, but maybe at some point we'd want to look back, like maybe in 100 years, and see what everybody did during their lockdown. And we shifted all of our programming. We moved everything online. All of our children's programs shifted online. Our English language learning programs, our literacy programs shifted online. All of our tech classes shifted online. We all very quickly became fluent in Zoom and Google Classroom. And my staff actually, we all started taking Mango Language Learning's course. Mango Language is a database that the library offers for the entire community, but they have specific training on just about any language you could think of for librarians. So we've all been working on Spanish for librarians. And I think my 5-year-old probably learned the most. Her Spanish is excellent, bueno. And we also, all of us completed a 9-hour training on working with the homeless in public libraries. So we were really proud to finish that training as well. So I think we shifted pretty quickly. We were back in the library in June and then offering our version of contactless pickup right in the entryway as of July, and have been holding steady with that ever since.
Let me see, here's another question. Can you tell us about the origins of some of the innovative technology, such as Wowbury, an expanded user-friendly website and access to films, Canopy, and so forth and so on? Some of these were apparently initiated outside of Waltham, but can you connect the dots regarding the technological explosion that makes so much more accessible?
Yes, so go ahead.
And I will add Hoopla.
Yeah,
I've been using one source and they had a limited number, and Hoopla means that we can all borrow books, it seems. So things like that were really quite noticeable.
Yes, since I've started, we've really been focusing on sort of what I was speaking to earlier, really taking, especially as a new director, sort of taking a breath to figure out what our materials budget was and to make sure we're sort of doing our due diligence in terms of what we're spending our materials budget on, and making sure that we're putting our money where Waltham patrons want. Mm-hmm. And it is like a constant, it's a little bit of an art and a little bit of a science and a little bit of empathy and putting yourself in other people's positions, and a little bit of ego check as well, right? Making sure it's not about what Kelly wants to read. It's about what Waltham wants to read. Maybe it's a little bit about what I want to read, but mostly it's about what Waltham wants to read. And so we really took our time and started investigating all these platforms that existed and talking to other libraries and seeing what successes and what failures they've had with these platforms. And it's just been in our long-term plan over the last couple of years to just start adding more and more digital content, not in addition to our print materials. That's they're certainly not instead of. Maybe a little bit last year during lockdown when we couldn't get materials in the building, but just in addition to. And they've been, like I said, Waltham's #7 in terms of e-material circulation through Overdrive, which is that's a really high number for the size of our community, and people love it. And so we're happy to add even more and more of these platforms. They're awesome.
The last few years, 3, 4, or 5, you've had a summer reading program, a book that everybody, that's everybody in quotations, everybody in Waltham reads. Are you planning to do so this summer?
So we're not planning on doing it this summer. So we typically do watch, read, listen, and what we actually choose is we choose a story. And the difference there is that we choose a story so that you actually don't have to read the story. You have the option to read the book, and there's a variety of formats in print, but you can also listen to a soundtrack or a Broadway is it a libretto? So basically you can listen to it, you can read it, you can watch it on a DVD, because we really wanted the program to be, again, as accessible to everybody, to take away all barriers to participate. And we decided, because of so many unknowns in our operating hours, to plan for Watch, Read, Listen. We actually start in November. It takes about 2 to 3 months just to decide on what the story or the theme is going to be. We all do a lot of the team does a lot of reading and brings proposals to the table. We do presentations, we duke it out, we argue, we vote. It's so much work, and with everything going on with COVID and just currently with some of the cases and only having half the staff in the building at a time in groups, we've decided to take the summer off for Watch, Read, Listen and come back bigger and stronger in 2022. We are going to have a summer reading program. We're doing it virtually with a platform called Beanstalk. We actually won a grant to pay for 2 years of that. So we did it last summer for the first time, and we'll do it this coming summer as well. So we will have summer reading for adults and for children, but we're going to hold off on Watch, Read, Listen.
Those are big.
Thank you for asking.
Oh, those are big
Yes.
projects, and they're so much fun.
We put so much heart and soul into them, and it's like the best thing at the library. I love it so much. And we like to have this big kickoff party, but it's hard to plan all that stuff when you're not sure if it's not just, are we wearing masks? Are you going to be allowed to come to the lawn? You know, we thought, let's just save our brain power, and we're going to come back bigger and better in 2022. The challenge is on. I can't wait.
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
In the year before the pandemic started, Marie Daly, a local resident, gave a talk on the 1919 Spanish flu in Waltham for the Historical Society. Now that we have all lived through the 2020 pandemic, and in parentheses, hopefully, I would love to see the library put on her talk again.
I would, yes.
That's interesting.
Yes.
How
We've
did-
actually done.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, we've actually had a couple talks on the 1918 pandemic, which were very interesting. In my opinion, a little spooky. Hopefully we'll have a roaring 20s after this pandemic, but I would be very happy to reach out to Marie to come and give a talk as soon as she's available to. What a great idea.
You've had a number of Zoom programs and webinars with speakers from all various walks of life. How do you choose them? How do you decide what?
That's a great question. That's a great question. We have a part-time program coordinator who does a lot of this work, and she spends a ton of time. Again, there's a lot of research behind it. We're looking at data of what Waltham patrons are actually interested in, what's sort of trending in society. You know, what are the global conversations people are having. We always say we want to be the best library in the world. We don't want to be the best library in Massachusetts or the best library in New England. We're trying to take on the world. So we have to have this global mindset. And Deborah Hoffman is our programming coordinator, and she hosts a lot of the adult programs, and she does a ton of reading and research to find out whether a topic would be of interest to Waltham. Again, looking at what other community organizations and some of our partners are just working on throughout the year, certainly around themed months, things like National Poetry Month or Pride Month or Black History Month would be easier subjects to focus around, but certainly looking at what books were popular in Waltham this year, what stories kept people's interests, and trying to use that as a starting off point. We had a lot of programs over the summer that featured some really amazing women speakers. I'm a big fan of Dr. Kelly Carter Jackson, and she came to talk about the role of Black women in the suffrage movement. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she's, I think I've seen her speak at least 3 times now, and I love her. And part of the, you know, the idea behind that was celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. So things like that, really lots of inspiration. And honestly, a lot of times patrons will come in and say, you know what you should do? And we say, great, we are happy to do it. I think hearing from Waltham patrons directly is the best way to do it, or the best way to get some good ideas as well. Okay. It's a great question.
I have a couple more questions here.
Sure.
Is the library looking at offering community education classes in partnership with public schools? Our city deserves a robust adult community education program. And I'm going to throw in an editorial comment. I remember it's been a few years of being able to go and take an adult Spanish language course at the high school as part of
Yes.
the community. And I know that you do offer English classes, at least English classes. So can you fill in the empty spaces there?
Yes, so we're pretty committed to offering as many classes as we can as the public library. And I feel like our typical wheelhouse would be technology classes, job support classes, English language learning classes. We'd like to start offering Spanish classes and, you know, sort of a variety of maybe not for school credit classes. I think that's something that we will always strive to do more and more of. I don't want to speak out of turn. I would love to partner more officially with the school to offer some more programs. Our teen department has been in touch with the high school for some of their extended learning programs, and we would love to expand on that. So I hope the question is not will we, but when will we? And I don't have an exact answer right now for that, but it's certainly in the back of all of our minds as well, particularly with the high school. I think that question, although I'm happy to be wrong, but I think that question was maybe more about the adult learning versus us offering 4 credit courses for high school students, which is sort of what I was thinking. But I would love to do more of that. I think that would be an amazing collaboration for both of our organizations, for sure. That would be a great next step.
Another question, have historical documents such as found in the Waltham room been made available online since so many people can't come in person?
We're, yes and no. We're doing as much of that as possible. We're asking people to reach out to us so that we can reach out to us directly so that we can email or scan or somehow send them directly to people who have questions. So the short answer is we are offering patrons access to all that materials. If you call us and let us know what you need, we will get it for you. That's not a problem. It's not all accessible online. We are trying to shift as much as possible through an online, I can't think of the word right now. We are trying to shift everything over online so that it is searchable that way, but that's a very long and intensive process. It is something that I will tell everyone that we'd love to apply for a grant to get all the newspapers digitized. That was the word. We'd like to have the whole, you know, as much of the Waltham room as possible digitized. I think that would be so valuable for the community, starting with the Waltham Tribune. I think that would be a huge asset. The Cambridge Public Libraries, if any history buffs have seen, they have a tremendous archive, and they have their local paper archived and digitized, excuse me, and it's so wonderful to read. It's really, it's a wonderful platform, and we'd actually be interested in getting the exact same thing for Waltham. So that is on the to-do list as well.
Okay, were you considering holding the annual book sale online this year?
Oh, that's a good question. We are not. We very loosely talked about that, but just with everything going on, we can't have everybody in the building. We couldn't have all the friends come in to do all that sorting, and we can't socially distance everybody enough to make that happen. So we're holding on to hopefully have a book sale in the fall again for sure. We're not going to have a spring, April book sale, but we are open to the idea. We're leaving it a little bit loose because we thought we can get everybody vaccinated and we're in a good, safe spot. We could even potentially have a book sale this summer outside on the lawn and get a tent and do everything outdoors. So we've got a couple of ideas in the background. It's still just waiting to see how safe it is to open up and what the health department says. No more pressure on them, but we're certainly running everything by the health department for sure.
Well, that makes good sense. Now, you mentioned you have been library director for 6 years.
Yes.
If we go in the time back machine, when you first started 6 years ago, what were some of your primary goals or things that you thought you wanted to address right away? And then we'll come back to present time and see where you're going from here.
Oh, that's I am so glad you asked this question. When I first started, one of the first things that I did was I sat down with every single staff person one-on-one, and I asked them a series of questions. They were all asked, they had time to think about it. And I asked them, the basic questions were sort of, what do you like best about working here? What do you like least? What's something that I should know? And I recorded all their answers and sort of tallied them all up. And I used that, it was before I had done a strategic plan for the library, and we used that as our sort of kicking off point. I really wanted the staff to feel invested in the changes that we knew were coming. Everybody knew the changes were coming. You don't get a new library director without change. And so I listened to everything that they said and used their words as a plan. And some of the things that they actually told me, it was amazing. They focused on, I actually find this very fascinating. They told me they really wanted a teen librarian. We didn't have really a teen program at that time, and we got one. Not only did we get a teen librarian, we have this wonderful teen room. We have a full award-winning teen program. They wanted more programming, which we have done in spades. Again, we actually 874 programs last fiscal year, 23,000 people showed up. It's a tremendous number. They told me they had issues with not enough restrooms and a couple issues with inconsistent policies in the library, like where you could eat and drink. So everything that they said we went through and we tweaked, and we tackled everything on the list. We did every single thing that the staff said that they wanted to change or address or update, we did. And the one thing we didn't do was we never got more bathrooms, which is a bigger situation. But once we hit everything else on that list, nobody complained about the bathrooms anymore, which I thought was really fascinating. I think it was a symptom and not actually the disease that we needed to focus on. And so just this past fall, late fall, early winter, I met with all my current staff and did the exact same exercise. I asked them just about the exact same questions. What do you like best? What do you like least? What are you hoping for the library? And it was so interesting because almost exactly 5 years later, to ask these questions, the answers were so different. And what my staff was telling me today we needed to focus on was diversity, equity in the library, equity in the collections, learning about making sure we are being as representative of the community as we truly can be. A lot more focus on, I don't have those notes particularly in front of me, but that was the one thing that stood out to me so strongly. It was things like 5 years ago, the staff was worried about where people could eat or drink. And today they're just worried about inequality in our library services. And that's a huge transformation. That is a library, that is an organization that has truly transformed. And that was an amazing thing to see. And we've done a lot of awesome work. We have Watch, Read, Listen, and we have the Pie Room, and that is so fun and it's so great. And we've really transformed our collections. Our e-collections, as you said, they've grown tremendously. And our print collections, they were not in a condition, they weren't in the best condition. So they needed a lot of weeding and rebuilding, and we focused a lot on that. And those are all great tangible things that I think the community sees and appreciates. But I think having the staff grow and shift their mindsets like that, it was a really powerful moment for me. I was blown away. It was a nice way to transition into 21, calendar year 21.
One question here from Karen and one from me. Can you tell us a bit about weeding and the kinds of materials and books you feel are no longer relevant or desirable to today's library in terms of content, not condition?
Sure. So we follow actually we have a pretty formal weeding policy. We look at a number of things. We look at basically, the number one thing is, does Waltham still want to read this material? It varies for every collection. You could have a gardening book from 1988 that Waltham patrons might actually love. It might be the best gardening book in the history of the world. Julia Child is a classic. So you kind of always want to have a Julia Child cookbook. She might be a better example, right? Doesn't matter when she wrote it, you want to have Julia Child in your cookbook collection, just in case. That being said, you want to make sure that Julia Child book looks like it's in really good condition. You don't actually maybe want to have the original 1963, I forget her original one, but anywho, you want to have it in nice condition. So we're looking at things like, if Waltham wants it, we're going to keep it, but let's see if we can get a brighter, shinier, newer copy, because people don't want to take out disgusting books. And we use that, that actually comes up a lot in the children's room. we probably replace things in the children's room a lot more regularly because they are so heavily used. And baby board books, you know, babies teethe on them. A lot of families read in bed. So we always say, if this book doesn't look like you want to snuggle on the couch with your family with and read, or read up in bed, read up in your bed before you go to sleep, we need to get a new copy. But if it's just because it's an old book doesn't mean it's not a worthy part of the collection. If Waltham patrons are checking that out over and over again, we would keep it no matter what. We would try to get a prettier copy for patrons. In some cases, so with that being said, we always look at making sure if it's a really popular item and we can't buy it anymore, we would keep it even if it was still ugly. And we're also looking at, one of the benefits of Waltham is that we are part of the Minuteman Consortium, and that's something that, you know, the city, we pay for that privilege. So we do depend on other libraries sometimes to fill a gap. Sometimes that happens. This is sort of a very, very fluffy example, but let's say Waltham patrons, let's say we weren't really interested in cooking. Cookbooks really didn't move in Waltham, but they did really well in Newton. We may not buy as many cookbooks in Waltham then, and if people came in and needed an obscure cookbook, we'd just borrow it from Newton for them. That's one of the benefits of, I mean, Waltham actually really does love cooking, so that's probably not a great example, but you know, that's part of being in a consortium as well. So we take that into consideration. We want to make sure that there are still plenty of copies in the catalog for other libraries to use as well. You can Google the CREW method. It's CREW, and that's it's sort of the librarian's go-to guide for how you weed a collection. But a good collection, you should be weeding every year just about as many materials as you bring in, and we typically do that.
Now, you had mentioned earlier this evening about hotspots.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about those.
We need Todd, Annette. We need Todd to really tell you about the hotspots, but they're awesome. They're little portable devices that give you internet wherever you go. So if you don't have internet at home, you can check them out, and it's basically free Wi-Fi for wherever you are, whether that be at your house. For some people, like to use them if they're going on vacation. If you were going someplace and you weren't sure if they had internet, or you know they don't have internet, you can bring the wireless hotspots. And
well, I was just so unaware that you even had this capability. I mean, I know what a hotspot is.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But my phone is one when I get stuck.
Exactly.
But not everybody has that capability. Yes. And one of the challenges throughout the pandemic across the country has been communities where they don't have internet access, yes, where the parents may not have, yep, it. And I'm delighted.
Yes.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, we have hotspots, we have Rokus, we have Disney Plus, we have Netflix, we have a sewing machine, we have a Cricut. I always want to call it a Cricut, but it is a Cricut machine, which is the sort of vinyl printer. We've got so many fun things for people to play with, particularly when you're stuck at home. Yeah. Tell
me about Netflix. I can get Netflix through the library?
So you can borrow a Roku with Netflix. You can borrow a Roku with Disney Plus. And this is a funny story. I put the Roku with Disney Plus on it on hold, and it showed up the Thursday before we shut down. So I checked it out, and I had been waiting for it, and I checked it out, and the next day we went under lockdown. So during our quarantine, I happened to have the Disney Roku, the Disney Plus Roku checked out to my house, and it was a game changer. And I promptly subscribed to Disney Plus because I don't think you can have two small children during quarantine. But it's yes, you can borrow Netflix with the Roku, bring it to your home, plug it into your TV, and access all, have a nice Netflix binge session. It's actually a great way. It's a great way for people who don't want to pay for the service, who want to get caught up on some of their favorite shows or try some new shows. But it's also a great way to really decide if you want to kind of like a try it before you buy it situation, which I think is a really valuable resource for the community. You don't have to spend the money up front. Just come to the library, test it out, see if you like it, get help from a tech appointment to learn how to use it, and then you're on your way.
Go.
Yeah.
Great. Geez, I'm so glad you're here tonight.
Yes.
I'm always at the library. I'll be there more often now.
That's fabulous. Anytime.
Okay. Another question. Are there any controversies regarding the library that you've had to deal with over the past few years?
I don't think there's any I'm open to somebody reminding me, but I don't think there's been any, knock on wood, any major controversies that I'm aware of.
I think the only thing that we kind of were discussing before we came on the air had to do with the porta potties out in front.
Yes.
And that's not really a library controversy, but more a city controversy.
Yes, I think, you know, that's a good point. I think the library sometimes, I think that Waltham, I know that Waltham has a large population of homeless individuals, housing insecure individuals, and those with substance abuse problems. And they are not always the same thing, just because, you know what I mean? One does not necessarily mean the other. And, you know, we get a little bit, very, very little bit, but from time to time, there's a little bit of pushback about what people say to me is the homeless in the library. And that feels frustrating to me because what they're talking about is, you know, the way somebody looks or somebody smells. And that does not actually mean that they are homeless. I think that there's a little bit of judgment there. You know, the one thing that I say to that is we're here to serve everybody. We don't check housing status when you come in the door. We're happy to be a place where people, or anybody who needs us. And again, we want to meet people where they are and have zero expectations. So our expectation is not that you come in here being showered, that you come in being in your best outfit, that you come in even necessarily sober. We do have some rules on behavior, and we run a tight ship to make sure that those rules are adhered to. But we try not to have expectations, those type of expectations, because I think it's not fair, and it's just not what we are about. We are about service to everyone. And I think the library gets, you know, I have gotten, I guess, a little bit, I wouldn't call it a major controversy, but occasionally there is some pushback about what is the library going to do about, what are they going to do about the drug addicts, or what are they going to do about the homeless? And, you know, I always tell people very as kindly as I can, we're not going to do anything about it, because it's actually not a library problem. It is a city of Waltham problem. And I'm not disparaging the city at all. I think they've been, you know, this is a very challenging problem for many, many communities. And I think that they are doing their best. Waltham has some amazing services for people who need them, but it's not the library's role to solve that problem. I always like to joke around, librarians are very smart, and I'm sure we could find the solution to many major global crises, but this is not our wheelhouse. We are not social workers. We are not substance abuse counselors, or so I feel like that's a little bit of mission creep, and I think it's sort of a disservice to the library. We're just trying to best serve the entire community and to keep the library safe and welcoming and open to everybody.
Nicely said.
Oh, well, thank you.
Well, you know, several years ago, the League was at the library for the express purpose of answering questions and registering voters. And we got to know the people who spend a lot of time in the library. And it's a safe place to be, where people can be occupied without sitting out in the heat or the cold.
Right.
That's it.
Right. And we make every attempt. There's a lot of patrons that come in whom we are there every day. And we know these patrons. We know them by name. We know we're in touch with them. We're concerned when we don't see them. I think that was that's been a really hard thing about COVID, is there's some of our regular patrons that we haven't had the opportunity to see in. My staff has done an amazing job. They've actually reached out to a number of patrons just to check in and see if we can do anything. They've been in touch with the Community Day Center in Waltham, and also with Bristol Lodge, just to see if there's any special services that we can offer, whether it be delivery directly to their organizations. And some of the patrons have still continued to come in, but that's been a hard thing, I think, about COVID, is that we form these attachments with these patrons, and we are, like I was sort of saying earlier, you know, I was saying to Annette before we started that we're privy to these moments in people's lives, and we take that there's like this privilege, this connection that we have, whether it's helping you find a book for cancer treatment, or your child potty training, or you finding out you're pregnant. There are these powerful life moments, or looking for a home, maybe more accurately, or having a substance abuse problem, and we're the only, the staff are the only people you interact with on a day-to-day basis. That's a very tough position to be in, and we consider our role in that moment very important. Like we want to make sure you have a good experience in that. I digress a little bit. It feels very emotional. It's the hard thing about COVID, right? We miss our patrons. They're not here. I feel like we can't check up on them as well. And that's been a real, it's been a really hard thing, I think, for all of us. We miss everybody. We miss everybody.
And we miss the face-to-face, the library.
Thank you. Good.
I was there today to pick up a book. It's not quite the same.
It's not, no, it's not.
But it's wonderful being able to meet everybody online for the book clubs, for the presentations.
Yes.
I believe I speak for almost all of Waltham. I speak for all of Waltham. We are delighted with the work that you and your staff have done, especially during COVID. And it's a privilege to have you here this evening. I want to thank you so very much for spending the time with us.
Listen, thank you for letting me talk so nicely about the library. I feel so privileged to serve this community. It's very personal for me. I feel very fortunate to have all this support and such an amazing team to help me do this work. So thank you. Listen, I'll come on anytime and talk about the library. We haven't even gotten started really on all the children's room stuff. I can bore you for hours. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, yes, and thank you to everybody who watched.
We will have you back then.
Awesome.
Karen, who does our scheduling, yes, she says, yes, we'd love to have you back again. Awesome. So we'll reach out, and we're going to be continuing this series because we believe it incumbent upon us to let everybody in Waltham know of the wonderful people who keep our city as vibrant as it is. Kelly, thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Have a great evening, everybody, and we'll be back online again soon. Bye-bye now.